in treating or aggravating socialists and other communists who also had adopted the red flag as a symbol, and for that matter, as a lot of communist parties did, they adopted the same flag that the Soviet Union adopted, although it's not the same flag with the famous hammer and sickle. That was done after, during the Stalinist period, as anyone who's ever studied that form of politics understands or would know. But he does mention about why they adopted those colors, and I found that to be rather curious from a historical perspective and strictly as a propaganda perspective, because the book also mentions quite a bit about the use of propaganda against a public. And so he does talk about use of force, uses of violence as a part of the political program. That is important, because a lot of people, I think, from a historical perspective, seem to give this impression that Hitler was a guy who kind of degenerated into violence, or didn't. I mean, some of you watch any documentary on TV, you kind of get the impression that he's this really, really brash speaker who kind of descended into violence. That was not his program. The book, he pretty much says that violence is the program. He actually wants violence to be the program, and in fact talks about extermination or elimination of certain elements of the population. Most notably, dare I would say, people who are disabled and are not able, people he deems to be too weak to be part of the new German state. Although he does not specifically talk about a master race, or he doesn't mention that in the book. Although a lot of people attribute that to him. He doesn't talk about the size of brown or of blue-eyed or long-haired Aryans. He doesn't talk about that. But he does mention them when he talks about the Aryans. Again, doesn't tell you where they're from, doesn't tell you how they came to Germany, or if they were even in Germany at all. So that's why I said the confusion, if you're reading the book to say this man knew something or was trying to find out about something, clearly it does not. And I would say, as a final review, or as my review of this point, the book is full. It's very, very large. It's voluminous. It's 2 volumes, but it doesn't tell you a lot. So I thought, even if you were a racist, or if you are a person who subscribes to this type of theory, you're going to be disappointed. At least from my perspective, if you were a person who, if I, being a black man, if you were reading this book and you want to delve into your Eurocentric or Eurocentric culture, you're not getting anything here. I have to say that you're not learning about the history of European politics. You're not hearing the history of Germany in relation to European politics. He doesn't even talk about the history of Austria. There's nothing in this book, and I would say that extremely very little to discuss about history in this. And I do find that a major flaw in his writing. So if you are studying the book as part of a school text, you're going to be disappointed there. At least from my perspective, I think it was. But again, I will leave that open in the comments section for those who may want to discuss it at a later date. On the second book, White Fragility, again, Robin DiAngelo's book, which has a foreword by Michael Eric Dyson. This book is very, very important, and although it was written in 2018, it has some relevance, as I would argue, quite a bit of relevance to today's book. Again, I didn't want to bore people with the details. If you have the book in your home, you pretty much know what it's saying. DiAngelo is using, in my opinion, dare I would say, although she has 40 footnotes in her book, unlike, as I said, since this is a comparison of 2 books, there are no footnotes literally in Mein Kampf, literally, and the footnotes have to be provided by the author in the translations. And of course, two different authors, one writing in German and the other writing in English, of course, might be the reason for this. But I found D'Angelo's book, although a very interesting read, more similar to a primer on race. There are by far better books that have been written on the subject of race in America. I immediately talk about, and again, not to digress, I immediately think of Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis, Right-Wing Women by Andrea Dworkin, and other writers by feminists as well as black authors. Of course, Frantz Fanon's book, The Wretch of the Earth, would be by far much more stronger title on race than this book is. However, White Fragility is discussed in a different context as into her work as a sociologist. She does use anecdotal evidence as well as her own maybe personal notes in reference to this subject. So if you're reading the book, I found the book, it was never a solution. There really isn't anything in the book that says, oh, we need to do this, or specifically things dealing with American history. This is important. She is basically sticking to a point of saying, when discussing race, try not to or include or take this opinion. So it seems to me that she's more speaking to fellow white people. I have to say that from that perspective. I thought it was peculiar because even though I'm an African American, I have no interest. I thought, well, gee, if you're reading this book from her perspective, she basically is kind of talking to people like herself in the book. So there's a bit of an echo chamber effect when you're reading this book. In other words, if you're talking about race, she doesn't specifically say, when talking about race, say the following. But then again, there's some parts in the book where it's kind of weak and tepid. And again, as I said before, having read many books on the subject, I was expecting a little bit more power in the voice. And I was expecting a little bit more determination in it. I understand that because she's a sociologist, her writing might not be as strong as it, which is very strange comparing these two books together, because both books have major weaknesses. And I found that Robert DiAngelo's book was kind of